Thank you for your interest in the Henry County Chamber of Commerce's Candidate Conversation Series. We have reached out to candidates in contested races throughout Henry County, Georgia, from congressional to General Assembly to county. While this election cycle is unusual due to the COVID pandemic, we appreciate those candidates who have taken the time to speak with us about those interests important to Henry County residents and employers. Remember, it's your voice, it's your vote. Together, we can continue to make Henry County a great place to live, work, and visit. Please vote.
My name is Tricia Colpetzer, and I'm Chair of the Governmental Affairs for the Henry County Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here today with incumbent candidate for District 17 for State Senate, Senator Brian Strickland.
Tricia, good morning. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate the Chamber of Commerce putting this on so the citizens of Henry County and the business owners in Henry County can learn about the candidates running for this seat.
So Brian, as you know, District 17 is very wide and covers 3 counties, Henry, Newton, and Rockdale, as well as 8 cities. How do you connect and stay engaged with the citizens so that you're crafting legislation that's truly representative of them?
Yeah, it's a great question. The district goes all the way from the Clayton County line in Hampton, all the way to the Walton County line at Social Circle from east to west. Then it goes north to Panola Mountain just south of DeKalb, all the way down to the Spalding County line, and southern Newton County down to Jackson Lake. And so it's a very diverse area, a very wide area to cover. But I find that most people in the district all want the same things overall. To directly answer your question, how I communicate, I'm making sure that I'm going obviously to every event I can in all 3 counties. Even though over half of the constituents are in Henry County, I spend a lot of time in Newton, obviously, and Rockdale counties as well, to make sure I'm hearing about on the ground the issues that are important to them. We do the newer ways of communicating, the social media. We're out there, of course, with emails, all those kind of things as well. But we're making sure that people know we're not in Washington. A lot of people think that their state senator, their state representatives up in D.C. and doing a full-time job up there. We make sure to remind everybody we're here in your community. We're here in McDonough, in particular, where I work. And so I have a lot of people that reach out and we directly meet one-on-one in person, which a lot of people don't expect that opportunity from their state senator. And so, yes, it's a challenge with the wide area that we have. But luckily, with the technology we have now, and obviously me living here in the district, working here in the district full time, being from the district originally, we're able to connect with people here directly.
And what do you feel, or what have you heard is the number one issue facing our district?
So I think right now the number one issue is the health impact from COVID-19. And the number 2 issue related to that is the economic impact from COVID-19. And so back when this first started here in Georgia in March, we were constantly getting questions, what does this executive order mean? What can I do with my business? What does it mean that I have to shelter in place? And we're getting a lot of mixed signals. And the reason was, we did not know a lot about this virus yet. And so you had public policy and health officials saying one thing one day, something different the next day. And Governor Kemp was trying to navigate all that and have a balanced approach and not just say we're going to shut our whole state down. And so we spent a lot of time early on trying to make sure we were getting a clear message out to our constituents. Now, as a state senator, I didn't get to decide all these executive orders that were issued. That was something under the state law with a public health emergency. We gave the governor authority to issue these orders. So we found ourselves as legislators making sure we could explain the orders to our constituents and help them navigate through this. But as time went on, it shifted less from the health side to the pure economic side. Every single day I'm getting emails and calls from constituents that can't get an answer from the Department of Labor. And frankly, it's unacceptable. These are people that are entitled to benefits. This is not something that is just taxpayer dollars going to people. This is something you pay into with unemployment, and they can't get anybody the answer to follow the Department of Labor. And so we find ourselves every single day trying to be the go-between between our constituents and the Department of Labor to make sure unemployment benefits are going out. We've also worked hard to make sure these small business loans got to those that needed them as well. And now we continue to work with business owners who are concerned. Are we going to go backwards? Do we have to look every single day and see what the current number of cases are and wonder if we're going to close our business again? And so we're trying to make sure that these people are reassured that no, we have no intention of going backwards. Governor Kemp is wanting to work with you and make sure you can stay open in a safe way. And so it's a long answer to your question, but I can tell you in 2020, it's been obviously COVID-19 that's been the main thing I've heard about from constituents.
And speaking of small businesses, what are your top priorities for helping those who are struggling right now so much?
Yeah, to me, it's getting out of the way. Look, we have to take precautions. If we weren't sitting so far apart right now, we both have our masks on even here. It's important that we follow the science. And yes, it has shifted. Yes, we were told one thing early on, told something different down the road, but we have to go with what we know at the time. And if we could do one simple thing to reduce the spread of this virus, we have to do it. But at the same time, we shouldn't be requiring our restaurants to put plexiglass up. We shouldn't be telling our businesses you can or cannot open. I think people have to make decisions for themselves, and I think people are smart enough to make decisions for themselves based on the science that's out there right now. And so the biggest thing I think right now that I can do as a state senator is show some consistency and to go out there and not tell business owners what to do, how to open, how to run their own businesses, and try to get government out of the way.
Okay, and now what about larger businesses? So transportation and logistics is extremely important here in Henry County, including distribution centers, and it does help mitigate some of the costs that our citizens pay. How can we help balance that? Because transportation, as you know, is a struggle.
Yeah, and look, I believe we have too many warehouses in Henry County. I believe we had too many warehouses 10 years ago in Henry County. But it's one of those things that was approved way before all of us that are here now are in charge. We now have the warehouses here. We have a lot of vacant warehouses and more being built in our community. And they're being built on 2-lane roads. And so once again, Henry County is something we did for years in the past. We're playing catch up, trying to adjust to what the card we've been dealt. Now, I know that based on our distance to the port in Savannah, everybody will tell you that the number one thing Henry County can do is be a place that you can deliver goods, you can hold goods. And we're gonna be that at the same time, even though we have too many warehouses, there's only so much you can do to stop that because of the market. But here's the good thing about it. I think that if we, instead of trying to just fight warehouses at this point, we should fill the ones that we have, and we should try to fill that with advanced manufacturing. And that's one of the things this governor has worked on, Governor Kemp, and we've seen recent announcements. For example, the Toys R Us warehouse just south here in McDonough, we now have advanced manufacturing coming in there. And so if we can hold your goods in Henry County, we can make your goods in Henry County. And that is where you get beyond the minimum wage or slightly above jobs that sometimes exist in just logistics itself. If you get into the manufacturing side and leverage that, which our chamber has been doing a good job of, economic development team's been working on at the state and local level, that's where you get the better jobs that can come with the warehouses that we can leverage based on our distance to the port in Savannah. Now, directly on the question of transportation, the most important thing to me right now for Henry County is getting the Bethlehem Road project completed. And in case you don't know what that is, that's putting a new interchange between Highway 155 and Bill Gardner Parkway along 75. And what that will do is provide a way that trucks can get on and off the interstate without using 155. And of course, they're not supposed to now, but using Bill Gardner Parkway. And that will allow all the truck traffic to go to one spot and take the load off the other two exits. And that can help us also create an area where our warehouses can be housed, where our trucks can go that's not sitting right beside our neighborhoods. I used to live in a neighborhood that backed up to the Home Depot distribution center. My parents still live just on the other side of the Greenwood industrial area, so I pass through it all the time still myself, dealing with that traffic on 155. You can put 8 lanes on that road, it's not going to make a difference when it comes to the trucks. And so I think we have to get the trucks to a new interchange. And the good news is we have, before I was involved, to give credit where credit's due, our chamber and our leaders in our community worked for years to get that project going for the interchange, and it's finally gotten to the federal level. We have President Trump that's been supporting it. We have Governor Kemp that's supporting it. We had some issues with some of our local commissioners playing politics over it, and finally they've come together, hopefully most of them at least, to support it. And I think that's moving forward right now. And I know we're in the final stages to make sure that money goes towards that project. And that's the most important thing I think we can do to help take some of the trucks off that area.
And as far as transportation, in 2018, the Atlanta Region Transit Link Authority was created. How do you feel about alternative means of transportation, or what do you feel are the best ones?
Yeah, and so the market tells us that the best thing right now are using these buses, which is why you see the new park and ride coming up on Jonesboro Road. You obviously have park and rides on other exits down by Avalon 155 and also further up off of, I think 138 has one. And so the idea of that is you can go and park and get on a bus that has Wi-Fi that can use the express lanes and use the HOV lanes to get you in and out of Atlanta faster. I would still like for us to consider rail at some point, high-speed rail in particular. We have seen that heavy rail such as MARTA does not make sense economically. You have to pour money into that. You're not going to be able to pay for that. I don't think it's something that our community wants. But if we could get high-speed rail and go a different direction with that, that's the way where you can get on a train in McDonough and be in Macon in no time, be in Atlanta in no time, Chattanooga, Savannah. That'll be huge for us if we can go towards that. Again, the challenge is the money side. Still, the market says it doesn't pay for itself. And so I think at some point, we as citizens have to be willing to do something different. Otherwise, we're going to keep using our cars. We've seen a change in traffic in 2020 when it comes to rush hour, of course, with COVID-19, more people working from home. But I think you have to see a willingness of the citizens to want to buy in to a rail system like that. Otherwise, we continue to fund the buses. We also look at adding the truck lanes on 75, which will help, one, of course, alleviate the truck traffic. A big problem that we have in Henry County is not just the trucks and cars on our side roads. It's when the interstate clogs up. As you know, we're sitting here just off the square of McDonough right now. Everything clogs up because everybody's using 42, 155, trying to use those side roads, and it blocks everything up for us. Having the truck lanes on 75 that will run from Macon to McDonough will put the trucks in a separate space, and more important than the traffic from a safety standpoint, it means you don't have to drive with trucks next to you on the interstate as well. And so that'll help as well as far as our traffic here.
So going back to workforce, there's an increasing disparity between the availability of and the need for those involved in skilled labor and skilled trades. How can we move toward fixing that and helping to ensure our future generation is adequately prepared?
So we have, especially the last 10 years, changed the way we think about education. When I was in high school, Henry County High School, when I graduated in 2002, I remember before that, at some point in my high school career, a meeting with a counselor, and I was given two options. I was told you're gonna go the technical route or the college prep route. And the idea was, if you have good grades, you're gonna go the college prep route. If you need some help, you're gonna go the technical school route. That was how it was taught to us, and that was the wrong idea, because we'd learn later on that the kids that went the technical route were actually making more money than the college prep kids. And so now we've learned from that, and we're trying to get more kids to get a skill and pursue a skill while in high school. Of course, with our dual enrollment program, that's really taken off. Our Academy for Advanced Studies here in Henry County, we have high school kids that are learning things that kids were learning in college with student loans in the past. And mixed with all that locally here for Henry County, the one piece we were missing was that post-secondary option here in Henry County itself, having that technical school here. And so Southern Crescent came along, and again, I will say, when I had nothing to do with something, I was not the one that brought Southern Crescent here originally. That was people before me. They brought Southern Crescent here, and I came into office when the groundbreaking was happening for that first building. And I was able to work with my delegation. This is when working together matters as a delegation, Republicans and Democrats in Henry County. We came together, got funding for building number 2. And this past year, we came together this session and just got funding to purchase the Lakemont strip mall heading out Highway 81 outside of McDonough, that abandoned strip mall, to put another campus right there to expand Southern Crescent even more. I think Southern Crescent is the key for our workforce, because now when those companies want to come to Henry County and have advanced manufacturing, they can take our kids from our high schools, our public schools, take them to the Lakemont abandoned strip mall we're about to completely redo with a $6.7 million project. And we can train the kids there without getting student loans for the jobs they can work here in McDonough. That is the key to me. That was the piece we were missing years ago. That's the pivot we made as a community, but we have to keep doing that. We can't go backwards. We can't have this rhetoric that just says we don't want jobs. We don't care if there are warehouses. We don't want you to come in here at all. We don't want any more warehouses. Close them all down. That's going backwards. That's sending the wrong message to the manufacturing folks that want to come here. And we have to continue to support Southern Crescent. We can't worry about a turf war. Southern Crescent's in McDonough. You can't be upset because it's not in Stockbridge, not in Hampton, not in Locust Grove. we got to focus on that campus so all of our kids can get educated there for those jobs that are coming here.
And so you talked about the more traditional route. And right now, every year, students are racking up about $105.5 billion of student debt a year. How can we help mitigate some of the rising tuition costs?
Yeah, I think one, it's supporting our dual enrollment program. I carried a bill this past year that reformed dual enrollment to make sure it had a funding model to keep it in our budget for years to come. So one, that helps decrease the amount of college expense you're going to have by getting some of the stuff done while you're in high school. Second, as I was just alluding to, it's continued to push more towards the technical school route. Now, it's not for every kid. There are plenty of kids, they want to go get a bachelor's degree, liberal arts degree, go a different direction. That option's still there. But I think the biggest problem we've seen is we were told in the past, and some people may still say this, just go to college, get that degree. So what do? You change your major. I mean, I did this. You spend the first 2 years of college trying to figure out what you want to do in life. And you hope that you survive the first 2 years in college and don't have to drop out or fail out and have those debts along with that. The idea of getting kids early in early high school and getting them thinking about what they're good at, what skills they have, they want to pursue, is a way to keep them from spinning their wheels in college and getting extra debt they shouldn't have to take on. Now, the other direct issue is the cost of tuition. And unfortunately, it's something that is set up by the Board of Regents, which is a separate arm of the legislature by our Constitution. But just because they're separate, we don't directly control the cost of tuition, doesn't mean as legislators we shouldn't put pressure on them to reduce those costs. And we have been doing that, and it's not just me, it's honestly all my colleagues in the House and Senate have been saying the last several years especially, you have to get tuition costs under control. You have to stop looking at just building these large buildings on our traditional university campuses and look at more creative ways, which COVID has forced us to do, to educate in a cheaper way with technology. And so we've seen the last couple of years tuition costs have flattened and they've stopped increasing tuition costs. But we've got to stay on the Board of Regents to make sure these unelected people continue to know that the biggest thing we care about is making sure that we have quality education in Georgia, but it's something that everybody can afford, not just those with wealthy parents.
Well, and hope has been a big part of that. There was proposed legislation to allow casino gambling, horse racing, and sports betting, although that failed to go to a statewide referendum. Do you see that coming back in the future, especially within your district? As you know, Atlanta Motor Speedway is here, and they had proposed renderings of a casino complex.
Yes, and I do think it's something that's going to come back up. The problem with the proposals in the past, and in my opinion, the reason that it hasn't gone anywhere yet at legislative level, is you came in and originally they had this bill from the House that was going to create a monopoly for a couple of the big casino companies. The big companies come in and buy every lobbyist in Atlanta, and they want this monopoly set up through licensing, where you have one big casino in downtown Atlanta, one big one in Savannah. That was not what was going to be best for all of Georgia. And I've never believed, and a lot of us did not believe, we should just give these large corporations free reign through government regulations, through protections from us, to come in with a low tax rate, not putting a lot towards hope as well. And so now the conversation has shifted the last couple of years, and especially this year, we are now looking at a model that instead will create more competition, allow some of the smaller casino companies to come in and compete if we're going to do this. Ultimately, the citizens of Georgia have to decide. It'll be on the ballot as a constitutional amendment when the time comes, but it's important as legislators that we don't just pass an amendment, send it to the voters without the enabling legislation. And this is what I mean by that, why it's important. If the voters approve this, that gives free reign for the legislature to then set the licensing up with a separate bill. I think it's important the voters know what that license is going to look like in advance when they vote on it. And so what I'm supporting is enabling legislation that sets up the model to make sure we're not getting monopolies out and make sure that people can actually come if they want to Atlanta Motor Speedway and do something. But with the constitutional amendment at the same time. And there are those that want to go a different direction and ram this down the throats of Georgia voters, but you will not know what you're voting on if we do it that way. So going back to your original question, yes, that conversation will continue. Whoever's in the legislature for you in the years to come will have to make that decision. I would anticipate, especially in the next 2 years, that coming back up.
And so with constitutional amendments, we have some on this year's ballot. What is your position on those?
So I support all the amendments on this year's ballot. You have, and make sure I get them all, I may miss one when I'm talking about them here, unless you have a list. But first we have a sovereign immunity amendment. And most of these amendments, people are like, shouldn't this already be the law? But it's over time, we have courts that say that certain things have to be in our Constitution in order for us to have legislation. So one is an amendment that allows you as a citizen to hold your state agencies and other governments in Georgia accountable if they violate a state law or they violate your constitutional rights. Instead of having no ability to go into a court of law and sue to make them stop doing that, that amendment will allow you to do that. Second, there is an amendment that prevents a referendum that prevents Habitat for Humanity from paying property taxes on projects that they're doing. And third, there is the dedication of fees amendment. And again, this ought to be common sense, but the legislature should have the authority, and if you vote on this, we will, to when we set fees for things such as tire fees, when you throw tires away, we should be able to connect the dots and say those fees must go towards this. It must go towards mitigating the tires in landfills or whatever it is. Right now, the law does not allow us as legislators to set a fee and say where it has to go. And so it allows us to dedicate fees for certain purposes.
With the seemingly continued politically polarized climate, how can you work together with members of a different party in order to continue progress?
Yeah, I think that's the most important question for everybody, especially in this campaign. Most people are focused on what's happening in Washington, D.C. and how divisive we are. And we have, as a society, accepted this idea that we let one party get in control and then we get mad at them, vote them out, let the other party come in with all these promises. And as a team, they get in there, do the exact same thing, we vote them out, and it's a cycle that's just continued. And I think people are more turned off than ever from that cycle. What's important to me is we do not bring that to our own backyards in Henry County and our local races. We have a history in this county, and we've talked about several of these things, where our delegation, which is a mixed delegation of Republicans and Democrats, and by delegation I mean the House members and Senate members that cover parts of Henry County, Rockdale County, and Newton County. For me, I have a Democrat, Senator Emmanuel Jones, that covers the rest of Henry. I have a Democrat colleague, Tanya Anderson, that covers the rest of Rockdale and Newton counties in the Senate, and there's a lot of House members. If we are fighting each other, then we may make some great ratings on TV. You may like to watch us yelling at each other on TV, but you're going to pay the price, because that means when we're looking at $6.7 million in the budget this year to fund purchasing that Lakemont strip mall, if we're fighting each other, if Senator Jones and I can't get along, we aren't going to be able to go together and get that money. It takes a team. One of 56 senators, one of 180 House members can't get anything done by ourselves. We have to work together. Again, we can play politics. I can go up there and I can give speeches all day long. I can go and do protests. I can do sit-ins. I could do things just to get myself on TV, but I've accomplished nothing for the citizens of Henry County. So it's important, whether you're Republican or Democrat, look at your candidates on the ballot and see, this is what I look for. Are they talking about national issues? Are they using sound bites? Because that's not stuff we deal with. Or are they talking about real things we deal with at the state level for Henry County, for Rockdale County, Newton counties? That's what you should look for, and that's who you should elect.
And so you talked a little bit about your relationship with more federal and national. What's your relationship with local government, with the county and cities?
Yeah, I have a good relationship in all three of my counties, my local officials. And I think the reason that I have a good relationship is I let them do their jobs. I'm not the guy that goes to your city council meetings or your county commission meetings, as some people do, and try to tell them how to do their jobs. I think we all have different roles in our capacity in government. And when a citizen elects their council member, that's somebody that's closer to them than their state senator. You mentioned all the cities that we have in the district. When a citizen elects their county commissioner, that person is closer to them than a state official as well. And so I think it's important that we let these people do their jobs, and we work with them when they need our help. But overall, I try to stay out of their businesses, their business as county officials and city officials.
And with COVID, we're all facing lower or decreased property tax collections as far as sales tax as well. Mm-hmm. How is the state prepared to deal with a decreased budget?
Yeah, it's very difficult because luckily in Georgia, we can only spend what we take in. We can't go and borrow money like's happening in Washington to even try to stimulate the economy right now. But I say luckily because that means we're not going to get in debt over this. We have built a rainy day fund up at the state level in savings to account for what we're going through right now. And we have seen revenues continue to trickle back up at the state level. Every less dollar in revenue that we take in, we got to find something to cut in the budget. Nobody wants to cut anything in the budget, especially when over half of that budget goes for education. Another big chunk goes for health services. Of all things to cut right now, education and health services. And so it's important that we keep our revenues going. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. The key to that is not doing what they're doing in New York or in California, other places in our country, and letting businesses reopen in smart ways. We passed legislation for COVID immunity liability this past session to make sure businesses can open freely. Look, people are smarter than us in government. A business owner knows better what to do with their business than I do. And I think if we let businesses continue to operate, continue to open up in a safe way, let citizens decide if they want to go to a business or not versus making them stay at home. That is why Georgia was once again ranked the #1 state in the country in which to do business. We continue to see, and you go Google this, read the articles, article after article, commending how Georgia's handled COVID-19. While they're criticizing us a few months ago, making fun of our governor, we now see that he was right all along and making sure that we as the citizens can make our own decisions. And that directly impacts how much money goes to K through 12 education next year, how much money goes for health services next year, because most of our tax dollars, as you know, comes from income tax and comes from sales tax. And so it's important that people can go out and make money and make a living these days.
And so with education being over half of the budget, I know you were a second signer on a bill for, and I'm going to probably get this a little wrong, but for the funding to follow the child, essentially. So if a parent chose to send their child to a private school, the funding that they would spend would follow the child.
Right.
Do you feel that will be brought back up?
I think so. It's a continuing conversation at the state capitol, and I can see both sides of the issue. You have the idea that you don't want to take anything away from our public schools. I'm a public school kid. I went all the way through public school here in Henry County, from Hampton Elementary to Henry County Middle, Henry County High School. And so it's important, first off, our biggest role at the state level is to fully fund our public education. But what happens when you have a school that's failing a kid? Should a kid be trapped based on their zip code at a certain school when it's failing them? The idea of that bill was to allow a portion of the funds that are dedicated for a child in a school to follow that child to a different school, to another option that parents can choose. And so really it's all about putting parents in charge, letting parents make those decisions. But that bill did not get out of the Senate this past year. I think it was actually last year we voted on it. But I do expect that conversation to continue.
Do you support or oppose legislation relative to the regulation and taxation of medical marijuana in Georgia?
I have supported legislation that will allow us to expand medical marijuana in our state. So backing up on this, when I was in the House, I supported a bill that will allow families, in particular families with kids with seizures, to have some medical marijuana they can keep in their possession in Georgia without being arrested to give to their kids. The idea was these parents know that this drug helps, and yet we at the state are saying we'll arrest you if you have this drug trying to help your kid with a seizure. We heard from parents that came into our committee and said, everything we've tried, my child continues to have these uncontrollable seizures, and accept this drug from this plant. It's not obviously what you smoke, it's the oil from the plant itself. And yet your law says I'm a felon if I carry this. So I believe it was back in 2014 when I was in the House, I supported legislation that will allow parents to have, or anybody to have, a small portion of the oil to go for these certain conditions. And over time, I supported a second bill a couple years ago that expanded the number of conditions you could use the oil for. As the science continued to teach us, the medical community continued to teach us that while this drug can be abused, as we know, this drug has some benefits to it. And the plant does. And there was a legislator from rural Georgia, a very conservative guy that stood up, older guy, and you would think he's just going to be completely against anything on marijuana. And I'll never forget what he said. He actually cried when he said this because he had a family member that was affected by this. He said, this plant was put on this earth for a reason. Do you think that God gave us this plant just to be abused? It's got some benefits, but if there's some benefits from this plant, why on earth would we stand in the way of that as legislators, as policymakers? So the biggest challenge we've had is not, we've decriminalized possessing the oil for these conditions, but we haven't said how you can get the oil. So now we've realized these parents, for example, to treat their kids have to travel to Colorado to get the oil and come back. Every time they cross the state line, they're committing a federal offense. Just because they have immunity in Georgia, we're making them federal commit federal offenses. So this past year, I was a supporter of a bill that was a little controversial, but it allows for cultivation of marijuana in Georgia in a very controlled way in greenhouses and with licensing to allow you to grow the plant just to get the oil off of it. So we can buy the oil here in Georgia. I think it's common sense versus making people in our state go underground and commit other offenses to bring this industry up, literally, out of the ground and allow it to be done in a very small, regulated, indoor way just to get the oil. And so I supported that bill, and that now the licensing process is underway of getting that set up in Georgia.
Thank you, Brian, for taking this time with us today and for your constant support of the Henry County Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Tricia, and I appreciate you and the Chamber of Commerce once again for engaging with us as candidates so you can learn more about us versus just what you see in the mail or read online. You can actually have a conversation with us about what's on our heart, what's important to us. Remind everybody, obviously, to go out and vote. Early voting, of course, is coming to an end. And after early voting on Tuesday, November 3rd, you go to your actual precinct you're used to going to if you haven't voted yet and go vote.